Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. This is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins. Our guests were on our show first about 2.5 years ago to tell us about this little jukebox musical that they'd just written. So now we're having them back to see how it turned out. To introduce them, Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
They were struggling young writers at the time, really trying to break into this business, but they've hit the jackpot, and we're so happy that they're back, celebrating, I believe, the second, going into your third year of Jersey Boys on Broadway. The writers and creators of Jersey Boys, Rick Elice and Marshall Brickman. Welcome back to Theater Talk.
Woohoo! Thank you for having us.
That's right. Now, 2 years into this juggernaut on Broadway, you've got a couple of productions around the country, I believe. You just opened one in London.
Three around the country, right?
Are you financially solvent now, Rick?
I'm comfortable. No, that only works if you ask me if... What was the question?
But say, Michael, they're in London, they're in Las Vegas, there's a tour, they're in Chicago, and then there's Australia, right?
Australia's coming up in just about a year from when this show will air, if the show airs sometimes before 2035.
And you're now financially comfortable, right?
I've paid off my student loan, finally.
It comes in.
Yes, we're okay.
The enduring popularity of this show, particularly I'm thinking as you go around the world with it, what is it that Australians, British people would respond to? Because the Frankie Valli music was the soundtrack to the lives of many baby boomers here in New York who embraced the show initially. What do you think is the allure of the show when you get beyond that kind of crowd?
It has yet to be determined whether there is an allure. We hope for the best. The records sold very well in the UK, and they sold very well in Australia too, as it happens. So the familiarity with the music, which has always been, I guess, the come-on of the piece, it has a certain amount of potency in those other places too. But the story, a good story is a good story. It seems to me that the theater-going audience in England has about a 500-year tradition of attending good stories, and so a good story is something that's going to appeal to them. And I say that not as the person who sits next to the person who invented the story. We were the vessel here. You know, the story was actually lived by these guys, so it's not immodest to say that it's a good story. It just is.
As much as I hate to admit it, I think television has a little bit to do with the interest, certainly in the story around the world, because we were preceded by The Sopranos, oddly enough. And The Sopranos was a big hit here, and then it was syndicated all over. And very soon after we opened in New York, and it looked like it was going to work, the producers started getting inquiries from odd places like Latvia and Melbourne and stuff, saying, we want the show. And he would say, why? And they say, well, Sopranos, right? It's New Jersey, and it's murder, and
they're singing. And they sing while they do it.
And so it's the real Sopranos, I guess you could say. So I think that we walked
countertenors.
We walked to dry land on their ashes a little bit.
That's interesting, because I never would have thought that the kind of mafia connection is what has the appeal around the world.
I think maybe it does, and it sort of built. Our initial audience was the people who knew the Four Seasons, who were old enough and had enough money to buy tickets to a Broadway show, and then we gradually got the show me crowd, the Upper East Side people. But and once you're sort of okay in New York, then people want it.
We had a little timing issue in London when we got there, just before performances started. We were just finishing teching the show, and we had gone away for a while and came and had just arrived at Heathrow, and passing by the newsstands en route to the hotel, and it's about 48 hours before the first preview, and in England, they put up the headline, they sort of write it in hand to sell papers, and the headline says, Jersey Boys killed, and then it says Jersey Horrors, and on another one, and you think, what the hell's going on here? We haven't even started playing this.
It was the New York Times.
So it turns out that on the Channel Island of Jersey, they had found in a boys' orphanage, like right out of a Guillermo del Toro movie, they had found these horrible bodies of boys buried in the basement, and each day another horrible revelation was occurring in the news, and this is what they were reporting. So the very first night an audience came, and the guy comes downstage and says, "We put Jersey on the map." The audience recoiled in horror at the idea that they were going to see recounted some terrible orphanage story. We've always been really good with timing that way.
I was going to say, did it help the box office?
Everything helps the box office.
Did you find in London, as you go outside of the United States with the show, you have to make some changes to it? Are there certain things that a non-American audience just don't seem to grasp?
Well, you know, they don't understand English in England. is the problem that we've actually what happened is that we actually had vetted out some of our more colloquial references with the actors, and they said, "Oh no, we get that." But in fact, for instance, the word "can," colloquial, in America means the can, or it means the toilet. Right. In England, it means the jail. So if you have a line of dialogue that says, "So my wife was sitting on the can," you get the look of an oil painting from the audience, and they're trying to think of whether they're in the right planet or not. So we had to go back and change 10 or 15
lines like that.
Local references, make them a little more appropriate.
Yeah. But the songs are fail-safe, right? I mean,
absolutely, they're the motor.
Yeah. You guys are working on a whole bunch of other things now too, I believe, right? You're doing a project with Tommy Tune.
Is a bunch more than two? Then it's not a bunch.
What are the two? You're doing something with Tommy Tune.
We're doing something with Tommy Tune, which goes to the Goodman in Chicago for an opening in October or September.
And what is it?
What's it called?
It's called Turn of the Century.
Is that the one that it's got that interesting sort of
cunning theatrical device?
It does. Yes.
That's right. That you never actually would tell me about, but it's got a sort of secret little
CTD, we call it, the cunning theatrical device.
It's an original musical and
comedy.
And a musical comedy. It's funny. And then the other is the Addams Family, which, like the Jersey Boys, he wrote me into it, and now I realize that it's really going to be a lot of fun. It's the Addams Family musical, with Andrew Lippa doing the music, and with the two guys who are working with Peter Gelb at the Met, who just staged Satyagraha, and are going to do the John Adams opera. It's called.
Aren't they the?
Improbable Theater.
The Improbable.
Dr. Atomic, yeah,
right,
the Improbable guys. Very interesting choice to do a Broadway musical, and it's...
We got along so well with the English on Jersey Boys that we've decided to keep the association going.
Let me ask you, Rick, you've been around the Broadway a long time, and I'm sure that you, like I am, was a great fan of Tommy Tune's work, those wonderful shows, Nine, Grand Hotel, even going back to Best Little Whorehouse. But Tommy kind of disappeared from the scene for a long time, and a lot of people have thought, the career was over with. You're starting to work with him now in a big new musical. Do you think he still got it?
Michael.
No, we just took pity on him because he didn't have anything to do, and we felt sorry for him because he's tall and thin and he looked hungry. Well, we went to him and said, we want to talk to the Tommy Tune who directed Cloud 9.
That was
not Nine,
piece,
not Will Rogers or at Grand Hotel or even Best Little Whorehouse Goes Public. We wanted to talk to the guy who directed Cloud 9 because that was because what we do, I think, with maybe intentionally and maybe by accident, is we tend to write plays with songs. And so we really didn't want a big splashy production, which is good because we only have about $6. But we wanted that first-person connection with the kind of theater tradition that we celebrate. I very vocally, and Marshall sort of down deep, where in that place in him where the theater can still be loved. And Tommy was the perfect nominee, and he was very graciously allowed us to pursue him until finally he couldn't say no.
Yeah, did you all shop around to get Des McAnon to Jersey Boys back when?
Nobody wanted to do Jersey Boys, and when we finally wound up through Dick's, what's her name? we were up late working last night. Rick's good offices. We wound up with Michael David at the Dodgers, and he said, "You know, I know who should do this. It's Des McAnuff."
He was smart, yeah.
Do you know Tommy Tune? Did you know him before he began to do this?
No, we met at Peter Stone's memorial, actually, when I said a few words, which he remembered. But he's been amazing. And you know, the contrast between him and Des has really been a wonderful education.
What way?
Too. So, well, you know, Des is very much a commander. In a way, you know, he's a guy who will lead you through the underbrush, you know, and he knows exactly where he's going and he knows how to do it. And Tommy is much less of a guy who gives orders and stuff. It's just a different approach. It's two ways into the same thing. Mm-hmm. Thinks very visually. He doesn't say that can't be done. He says, I don't know how to do that. And so immediately, you know, you go off and you try and figure out the way you can help him, you know. So it's a different, he's very, very subtle and fine, but inside is real steel, which is great. And it's starting to come out now as the dates are approaching.
Right. And so now when he looks over the script and says, out, change this.
Yeah, and it's great. It's really, really interesting how many different styles of personality you can have to come to, you know, to an actual production.
Yeah. How do you guys, you know, you're now in that tradition of Kaufman and Hart and Lindsay and Krauss.
Tradition. After one show?
I thought it was, who was it supposed to be? I thought it was
I think of myself as, as George Kaufman, and I think of Rick as Edna Ferber.
Only because of the way I dress, that's all.
So anyway, we're in this grand tradition, which we just started.
And I'm curious to know the collaboration, how you actually work together. I mean, when you sit down, you both sit at a typewriter facing each other like Spencer Tracy and what's her name? Hepburn.
Katharine Hepburn.
Katharine Hepburn, thank you very much.
I thought you were there, but you couldn't spit it out.
The thing about a collaboration is that that a dialogue is a good way of exploring ideas, you know. I've said this before, so I'll say it again, that after I'd worked with Woody on a couple of projects and I decided to go out on my own, I would actually sit at the typewriter, then it was a typewriter, and I'd do a dialogue. I'd say, all right, so what does this guy want? Maybe he wants this. Maybe, well, you know what? I'm hungry. I'm going to go out and get a sandwich, and I would go out and get a sandwich. And so when you have another person in the room, you have a dialogue, and it's a really good.
It starts to sound like The Shining a little bit, doesn't it? Where she looks over and sees
full work
insane
and no
typing.
So the way our work has evolved, and it's different. I've collaborated with only 3 people in my life, but the way it's evolved with us is that it takes the form of a really extended conversation. We come up with a story, you know, a scenario, which is a sort of a present, you know, in the historical present, and then we really divide it up. And I'll say, all right, I'll do the scene in which the husband and the wife are fighting over the children because I know that, you know. And Rick will say, well, I know this, and I'll do that, and then we trade it. And
so are there scenes in Jersey Boys that are all written by you?
No. No, everything is written by both of us.
So you talk it out, and then you actually go off separately and write the scenes off, and then swap scenes.
Although yesterday we actually sat in the same room for about 8 hours, which we do every now and then.
Because we have a reading coming up, and we have to.
When we're closing in on it, it's also good to be together because it's just always good to be together with Marshall. You know, I conspire for our alone
Do you act the scenes out?
No, but that's a good idea. We should try that.
No. And quite often neither do the actors, which requires us to come in. Anyway, I had a thought, but
you don't jump up on, like Mel Brooks, you know, jumps up around on the furniture and sort of.
Mel Brooks jumps up on the furniture.
So you've got these 5 productions around now. I said 5.
Yeah.
5. There's 5 companies.
So do you go over there and get them up and running?
We went over for London, and a few weeks ago when we began going up to and the first week of performances in Las Vegas, I was there, and when we're going back out there together in a few days.
So what might you be called upon to do there? What do you need to?
Well, in both those cases, London and Vegas, it was good to be there early on, beginning of rehearsals, early on beginning performance, when you start to get audiences, because there are certain tweaks happening with the script, and you want to make sure that the script's being well represented and that the audience is getting it, and they're leaving having had a terrific time, and we're all there obviously focused on that. With the other productions, it's basically you know, we get to fly in and enjoy ourselves.
I know, isn't it nice to have hits around the world, though? I mean, you fly in, go to
I don't like to
parties.
fly, so I don't care.
Did you cut it
But
down
in
for
Vegas,
us?
we will be probably required to wax Sheldon Adelson's car. That's
Are you going to cut it down for Las Vegas?
no.
You're not, because that's a big debate in
that
Vegas.
was a big
whether-
There was a
thing.
big debate about to do an intermissionless version or the 90-minute tab version, as they call it. There are all these sort of contractual reasons why things can't be longer than 95 minutes. That was taken all off the table long ago.
At your insistence?
At the creative team,
the
Bob
creative team.
and Frankie and us. Yeah.
We weren't interested in doing sort of a bait and switch because it was always going to be called Jersey Boys, you know, and Phantom of the Opera, for example, is not called Phantom of the Opera in Las Vegas. It's called Phantom. So it can be something else because it's called something else. But we were always going to be Jersey Boys, so we didn't want to do anything but Jersey Boys. And
If you go in and you do a cut-down version and it crashes, then you really feel like
Yeah.
well, also a cut-down
idiotic.
version of our show would end up being sort of like a
concert.
Exactly.
a cover
I mean,
concert, and that the real Frankie Valli's playing across the streets.
How involved in it at this point are Frankie Valli and Bob Gaudio? Are they as on top of all
Frankie's
the
on the
productions as you are?
road a lot. You know, he has a rejuvenated concert career. He did before, but this is, you know, hasn't heard. And Bob is amazing. He's quite spectacular. First of all, he has an amazing ear. He produced the album, which just went gold, by the way,
Really?
about 2 weeks ago.
It's a great-
No,
it's a
no,
great-
no,
One,
a
2
long
weeks
time ago.
Long time ago.
It's already
We just
like
got our gold records.
700,000.
But he is very, very adamant about making sure that the sound that the audience hears, the sound of the songs and everything, primarily because that's his, you know, his métier.
Right.
And he's great. He knows everything about that. He knows how to talk to the singers. He will have. In fact, Ryan, who plays Frankie in London, was actually in Nashville for a while.
They all have come out now to Nashville. Everyone playing.
Because that's where Bob Gaudio lives, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he gives them lessons and
Well,
tells
he
them how to make the
records them.
sound and
He
records
records them and plays them back, which is, you know, something that's very fundamentally different from performing and being given notes on your performance. In a theatrical setting, they actually get to hear themselves, and he sits with them and says, "Hear that? That's yes. Hear that? That's no."
It's the wrong
and
sound,
And so
it's
it accelerates the learning process in a really clever way. And he works in tandem with a wonderful rock and roll vocal coach named Katie Agresta, who has tutored every one of our Frankies and continues to do so.
Yeah, do you have any trouble finding Frankies? That's a
Not
tough...
anymore.
not-
Initially, of course, we were desperate when David Noronha opted to not come to New York.
It's still not the easiest thing in the world because
But
there's
it's
so
a
many
little
things.
easier.
There's so many things that the guy has to be. He's got to be a certain age. He's got to be a certain height. He's got to be a certain complexion. He's got to have a 4-octave range. He's got to be able to act. He's got to be able to move.
Sounds like you're looking
It's
for
a
Why
lot.
is it easier
Billy
now?
Elliot land here. what
Is
you
this
have to
easier
look
now
for.
because it's a hit and they want to be in it? Or
Yeah, there were people initially who didn't want to spend 4 months in La Jolla to do a jukebox musical. You know,
Right.
Sorry
So,
for that
you know,
term.
Or to do a
No, no.
jukebox musical, period.
period. So, it's still, we have Frankie Camp, what we call it.
Right.
Camp Castelluccio.
And they go out to and Gaudio
Well, it's
sort of-
not a physical. It's a virtual camp, but it means it's a regimen of.
And Marshall's the counselor. He tells the very late night stories over marshmallows. Now, the great asset of Gaudio's involvement is, in addition to his chops, is that he's the real guy. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, he's the guy who's sitting there who lived this thing. So he makes it first person.
Right.
First generation connection, which is why we show up when we show up, because we want to keep it first person for the new cast and the cast that change. Des is obviously involved. He's the director, our wonderful production supervisor and the production team. The associate directors travel around constantly, really, really working. What we can provide, all we, thank goodness, need to provide at this point is some sense of the original group, so that everybody who's doing it feels that they're still in touch with the original thing and not 75 versions down. You know, where you've heard it. It's like that old game of telephone, you know, where somebody tells you something, and by the time you get to the end, it's a completely different story.
Do you go back in to see the show on Broadway?
Sure.
Oh yeah, all the time.
And see how they're I mean, are they pretty
All the
good about
time.
keeping it together?
All the time.
Yeah.
Just
It's
the
all-
other day, Wednesday, a new Frankie went on at the matinee. There was one of those perfect storms, you know, where
Yeah.
the guy who plays the part wasn't well. The guy who ordinarily covers him was on vacation.
Yeah.
So a guy went on for the first time, you know, absolutely prepared, but he hadn't done it yet. It was
Yeah.
his Virgin Frankie performance, and it's always great to see people step up.
We've done, I think, by the time this airs, we will have done about 1,020 or 25 performances.
Yeah.
And some of those people have done that many.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it, you know, every day, you know, 8 times a week.
Yeah.
Well, is Christian Hoff still there?
Yes.
I mean, somebody like him who's such an amazing performer, and you really feel he loves it, right? And you really feel he loves it, and he's fabulous. You know that's.
I don't know how they
that's
do it.
what he lives to do.
They get a lot back. I know this sounds touchy-feely and everything, but they do get a lot back from the audience, and that makes it a little bit easier.
That's pretty
Well,
touchy-feely.
no, it makes it actually a lot easier. It makes it a whole lot easier than if they aren't there, or if they're screaming boo and throwing tomatoes at you.
Or if they're saying 8 performances a week is too many.
It's got to be fun to be in a hit where you know the audience is going to have a good
the
time.
first performance in Las Vegas, which extended over the first weekend, because the first show was on a Friday night, they didn't have the certificate of occupancy in the theater until 5:30 for a 7 o'clock curtain. The dress rehearsal that afternoon, the cast and everybody who was watching, the production crew, everyone's wearing hard hats. Everyone, the whole cast, they're changing costumes, putting dresses on over the hard hats, all that stuff. Really, really wild. The first performance, about 100 diehard fanatics from all over the country, and there's sort of a network of them now, showed up at Vegas, I think probably to see whether we'd screwed it up, because there are so many changes that happen to shows that go to Las Vegas, and they wanted to make sure that we were, keeping it honest, as Anderson Cooper would say. And they came and saw it, and they were, effusive, and they wait for the actors, and they get to know the actors. They have forcibly become part of the family of the show, and they know the actors who are playing the show in Vegas. They know the actors who are playing the show in New York. They know the actors who are playing the show on the road. I just read Marshall an email yesterday. This woman who went over from Vegas, went over to London and saw the show 3 times in 3 days and came back and went on the blog and gave her whole report. They're very, very proprietary about the show.
What's the Jersey?
Love them, but
I mean,
no, come on now, come on now. No, don't put down the fans, Bill. Without the fans, there's no theater. Without the audience, there's no play.
What did Bill Shatner say?
Well, Bill
He
Shatner,
said, Priceline.
Bill Shatner, does these conventions of Star Trek. Trekkies come, and there are 5, 6, 7, 8,000 of them in an arena, and he walks out and he looks at them and he says, "Get a life." For God's sake.
I was going to ask you, I have a sense, the Rent heads, the kids who love Rent, they're young, cute kids, and I think there were some, there's a Spring Awakening cult, and again, they're young, cute kids. What is a...
Springers.
Springer Spaniels. What's a Jersey Boys cult fanatic look like?
8 to 80, but I think sort of landing about around 60.
The hardcore.
No, I have to tell you, in my experience, I'm loath to contradict, so I think of this as an augmentation, not a contradiction. But I'm continually surprised how many people there are, sort of on the younger side, way younger side of me, sort of more like the two of you.
This is beginning to sound like an infomercial. Isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
just answer the question.
We just got to wrap it up here, but I want to ask you, it's true,
It's
you guys met playing poker, right? Is that how you knew each other?
No, we were introduced by legendary film director Stanley Donen.
Of course, yeah, wonderful. Yeah.
Former Theater Talk guest.
But you played poker before you started collaborating, right?
Okay.
We did. We actually,
not
there
what
was
they did.
I remember a particular poker game during which, because I basically show up to
For the
lose. During which we finished Frankie's last speech in the show. Do you remember that night?
No, I remember very little. My retrieval is really bad.
Wait, you're playing poker and you're writing the show at the same time?
Yeah.
No. We were out. So I folded, and then he folded, and the game was going on, and I remember moving off to the side, and we were fiddling with it, and
I don't think that ever really happened, but it's a nice story.
oh, it did. It actually did.
Really?
I can tell you what date it was too, but that would sound really obnoxious.
Who's the better poker player?
Yeah, I know the ranking of the hands. I don't have to ask, does a flush be 2 of a kind?
He's implying that I do, but which might very well be true. I couldn't possibly say. But what Marshall does that's really, really impressive is from where he is now, he can throw you cards, and they will land in front of you, and you can just pick them up and have a hand, which is really, he doesn't have to sort of get up and deal like that.
No, you can throw them across and they're face down.
His card dexterity is really top drawer.
It's my road game.
You must be enjoying being in Vegas then.
It's going to be interesting. And what we learned is that the 50 blackjack tables at the new Palazzo Hotel in the casino, guess what they have written on the felt? Jersey Boys.
It's pretty
So
remarkable.
they're out there on a limb.
It's because
I hope it works.
It's the
I mean,
cameras
I know
over the
it.
tables, the actual the logo actually works very well to help the cards contrast on the black and white security surveillance cameras. So it turns out to be a good thing for the hotel and a nice thing for us too.
Well, we're glad it's working out.
Marshall Brickman, Rick Elice, the writers and creators of Jersey Boys. Good luck with the show.
Thank you.
Good to see you again. Thanks for being our guest tonight on Theater Talk.